you've already mentioned a couple of. Let's get to the Brian Tyler Cohen conversation. Now I know it's a bit weird that we're kind of showing someone who sort of, much more professionally, but does what we want to do. But he's assembled a whole bunch of clips, and I just want to play 3 of them for you. So the first one is the instance where the GOP, conservative commentators and politicians, are blaming the Democrats for this shooting. Have a look.
Mike Collins, a Republican lawmaker from Georgia, tweeted, "Joe Biden sent the order." Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote, "We are in a battle between good and evil. The Democrats are the party of pedophiles, murdering the innocent, unborn, violence and bloody, meaningless, and endless wars. The Democrat Party is flat out evil, and yesterday they tried to murder President Trump." J.D. Vance wrote, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination."
Look, again, if we were debating and I pulled out of the card I make up an argument for that, I could debate on stage. I don't necessarily believe it myself, but I could debate that point on stage. That it must be stopped at all costs. I could make an argument for it if I was in a debating competition. Just being honest with you.
And of course, Lauren Boebert posted this.
I do believe that Joe Biden is responsible for the shooting today. Kyle Clark, an innocent supporter of President Trump, someone who loved President Trump and was there exercising their right to support him, lost their life today. Everyone who has called him a fascist, everyone who has called him a threat to democracy, who said that he should be put in a bullseye, as Joe Biden said.
I don't know if that's true, that Joe Biden said that, but I will remind you also of, what was their name from Alaska? Sarah Palin, who had a whole lot of bullseyes over maps of America, which were counties that we needed to win. And one of them was, I was going to say Tulsi Gabbard. That's the wrong name. And she got shot in the head by a supporter of Sarah Palin. The name's just popping out of my head. You watch the chat come up with it straight away. So, political rhetoric, and this is why we don't hold responsible the people for using rhetoric to the actions. Because it's like we were talking about, we're going to fight to the death to win this. We would all use that kind of thing. We don't literally mean to the death. It's hyperbole. But hyperbole to an unhinged person can end up in some pretty horrific situations. I'm going to keep playing. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right.
They need to have some very deep reflection tonight before another tragedy like this takes place.
First of all, the Democratic Party and Joe Biden did not try to assassinate Donald Trump. The shooter was a registered Republican. In fact, because that's inconvenient for the narrative, now conservatives are saying stuff like this.
Don't read too much into the political affiliation, because James Comey, also a registered Republican.
Apparently, political affiliation is only exploitable if it fits the Republican narrative. Otherwise, if it doesn't bolster Jesse Waters' claims, then it's suddenly a moot point. Do you think that Jesse would have been claiming that political affiliation isn't important if he was a registered Democrat? And beyond that, reporters from the Philadelphia Inquirer spoke to classmates of the shooter, and they were very clear about the fact that the kid was a conservative. One passage from the reporting says that a classmate of the shooter recalled a mock debate in which their history professor posed government policy questions and asked students to stand on one side of the classroom or the other to signal their support or opposition for a given proposal. Quote, "The majority of the class were on the liberal side, but Tom, no matter what, always stood his ground on the conservative side. That's still the picture I have of him, just standing alone on one side while the rest of the class was on the other."
There you go. So I've got 3 clips. That's the first one. The second one's going to be about the violence on the right. That's from the same overall thing. But do you want to speak to that at all? And someone put in the chat there that he did say put a target on him. There we go. It's true. Biden did say put a target on him. It was either the Republican Party or Trump, but it wasn't. Yeah, but that's what we're saying. I'm like, go give him hell. Can mean just try your best, or for some people could hear it as any means to an end. And that's why this whole it's almost a free speech conversation, why where I sit with whole free speech is, unless it's a direct call to violence, go and punch that dude in the head. You can't hold responsible the person who says the hyperbole versus the unhinged person who carries it out, no matter where it's from, Joey.
I mean, I just had a quick look at some of the imagery that Marjorie Taylor Greene has used, and it's Marjorie Taylor Greene election, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Together we will destroy communism and the Democrats, and she's posing with a 50 caliber rifle in the back of a Humvee or something like that.
Exactly.
And it's just I get political rhetoric. This is a battle for the soul of our country, all of this sort of stuff. But they've walked right up to that line, to the fact where a nudge, nudge, wink, wink would put you over it. But they know exactly what they're doing. And
Perfect
people
time.
have been talking about how dangerous it is for years.
Yep. And it's the perfect time. This is a little 45-second part of the same clip that Brian talked about, where he basically highlights a bunch of the violent rhetoric from the right.
It's not the Democrats or Biden who told rallygoers again to beat up protesters and that we'd pay for their legal bills. That was Trump. It's not the Democrats or Biden who laughed at Paul Pelosi being bludgeoned with a hammer. That was Trump. It's not the Democrats or Biden who called for military tribunals for Liz Cheney. That was Trump. It wasn't Democrats or Biden who called for General Mark Milley to be executed. That was Trump. It's not the Democrats or Biden who posted a baseball bat photo with Alvin Bragg and threatened death and destruction if he was charged. That was Trump. It's not the Democrats or Biden who reposted images on the Truth Social showing Biden hogtied in the bed of a truck. That was Trump. It's not the Democrats or Biden who laughed off a kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer. That was Trump. We don't want Trump in power because we don't want violence. So let's not get it twisted.
Yeah, so there's part two, and that's kind of speaking to what you already talked about. Should I just go straight into the third part?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the third part is we have a look at the difference between the left's response to the assassination, i.e. the left's response to their political opponent being in danger, and then the right's response when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked with a hammer. That's the two things we're about to look at for this last kind of 90 seconds of Brian for the day.
AOC, there's no place for political violence, including the horrific incident we just witnessed in Pennsylvania. It is absolutely unacceptable and must be denounced in the strongest terms. My heart goes out to all the victims, and I wish the former president a speedy recovery. Chris Murphy, there's no room in America for political violence. We should all condemn what happened today, and I'm hoping for the health of the former president and everyone else at the rally. And Joe Biden.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever.
No, that's the thing I'm kind of like, Joe, are you aware of the country? I mean, I get the sentiment in this instance, but are you aware that you probably live in the most violent country in the world with more deaths by gun than anywhere else? That in prisons, more people per capita more people than anybody else. So I'm just like, I get why you're saying this in this rhetoric, but I'd like to circle back to this conversation at another time, Joe. Maybe we could just do that about the violence in your country.
Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized.
Meanwhile, here's how the right reacted when it's a Democrat who's the victim. Paul Pelosi's bludgeoned with a hammer, and Don Jr. posts, "Got my Paul Pelosi Halloween costume ready." Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene getting her audience to boo Paul Pelosi at a rally.
Where Americans are robbed, stabbed, raped, kidnapped, carjacked, and murdered. But the only crime victim you hear about from Democrats and the media is Paul Pelosi.
And of course, Trump himself poking fun at Paul Pelosi after he was attacked.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
So no, both parties are not the same. Let's not pretend that one doesn't immediately and unequivocally condemn violence while the other one revels in it. The only difference is that the pearl clutching on the right only begins when the violence happens to them.
There you go. So you'll see now why I wanted to play Brian's bits. It synopsizes everything perfectly. And none of this is to have any kind of... what's the word? We're not saying, so ha, there you go, you got it your time. It's actually just to take a step back and look at this broader issue. and go, those on the right who are now blaming the left in America, even though the shooter was a Republican, and the left have a history of empathizing and wanting the best when it happens to people on the right, and the right have a history of mocking when violence happens to people on the left. It's just let's look at this isolated incident for an attack, a potential attack on this presidential candidate, and address it with the seriousness it needs. But if you want to start taking a step back and looking at the overall issue, yeah, Republicans, you got a few more questions to answer, I believe. Chewy.
I had someone ask me, because we're obviously going to be talking about this tonight. It's like, what does it matter to us here in New Zealand? And I think when you look at how the American political discussion, the tone of it has changed over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I see echoes of it in our own discussion. It has become more polarized, more extreme in a lot of ways. And certainly since COVID, we've seen things that, like, New Zealand's the country of, if anyone puts forward a strong opinion, everybody turns to them and goes, all right, mate, settle down. And now we're getting quite extreme conversations or positions like normalized. And I think you've said it quite a few times, if America sneezes, the rest of us catch a cold.
The world catches a cold.
And it's, I know people that live in the States that are scared of this coming election, but there is a hope that this will scare people into a direction of maybe trying to take this a bit seriously. But there are so many people over in the States that are disengaged from the process. They don't think anybody speaks to them. The system is actively set up to not listen to them, to not enable them to have their say. It's a deeply flawed and uneven system. So is this going to be a shock to the system, or is this a bump on a pathway that they're just locked into at this point?
Yeah, and that whole when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, I think isn't clearer than the last Trump election. I mean, you look at the amount of conspiracy theorists, the media is evil, COVID vaccines are trying to control us, Bill Gates microchips, that all started in America under Trump and then flowed out through the world. The world caught a cold.
Well, I think there's a really good point here as well. The amount of Russian influence into the American sphere, the amount of money, disinformation bots into social media and that sort of thing to destabilize their biggest global threat or rival. And also that just ramped up when they went into Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they know that this is a way that they can just keep, Ukraine's biggest supporter, biggest supplier of weapons on the back foot. And they know if Trump gets in, Putin will run rings around him. NATO will dissolve, and Ukraine's support dries up.